Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'll be sharing to you my personal reflection and the learnings on the racial discrimination on the essay I have created. But before that, let me define to you what is racial discrimination. So, racial discrimination is described as the intentional abuse or unfair treatment to people based on their race and ethnicity. This can be an act through unequal impact or indifferential treatment. May it be personal or indirect towards one another, towards an individual. So it has been a global concern for centuries already, and these are very rampant, especially over minority races such as African Americans, Latinos, Asians, and Caucasians. So, despite the effort of the government to eradicate the this racial discrimination, the essay that I have created, I have learned that the racial discrimination in American society still exists, and the learnings of this course, its relative materials have enlightened me that how high the frequency of racial discrimination in a contemporary American society is being recorded every day. And it discloses also that the study have shown that racial discrimination is still dominant in this American society or in the world that we are been living according to rank. So on my personal experience also, it has shown that Asians are being deprived in the American world because of our race or yeah. So I actually have learned that the racial discrimination is deeply rooted in the banking sector in America, wherein there's one instance that Asians get unfavorable lending and investment terms than white ones. So they would take it for granted or they would not take it seriously if Asians would ask for a service in a bank. And the materials claims that the racial discrimination in the housing sector in America still exists, according to RAM. And this is the reservation of abundant suburbans to white people only. So meaning to say, they won't allow foreigners or Asians or blacks to invest and reside in some American regions, which is true. And most of the movies you can see these things that they would prefer white ones or they would discriminate people or other foreigners. So there is still racial discrimination, especially for the employment, housing, credits, consumer markets, even in the markets, and even in the health sector, where in an American society, discrimination still exists. This is according to, by the way, um, one of the reliable academic sources. So it has been also, I highly noted also that white-oriented schools have better resources and conditions than those targeting people of Asian, wherein they considered Asians as poorly funded and low standards in education, which I doubt I should disagree because I think learnings will not be depend on the resources but the eagerness of individual to learn. And in addition, racial discrimination prevails in the current American health and environmental sector, wherein they would prioritize people who are Americans or they would consider taking good care of people on their own people in spite of the need of individual. And it also asserts that environmental racism practice has resulted in white Americans. Yeah, these are true, wherein Americans are dumping waste on the black regions or the poor regions, but they don't create or restrict the creation of dumping sites in their place for white dominance or rich people. So they would just dump the garbage there and to make them clean, while the people on the poor regions are sacrificing. Moving forward, there are different researches that acknowledge and found out that high prevalence of racial discrimination in American society in health sector, according to the National Research Council on 2004 research. So they would say that hospital promotes racial discrimination in a contemporary American society through healthcare personnel and hospital administrator. So you can see on this scenario, on this instance, that racial discrimination still exists. And American hospitals are overcharging people of colors or races, making them to qualify in order for them to qualify and access healthcare compared to white Asians. How pathetic is that? So relevant courses, these courses have also disclosed some federal government's indirect act of racial discrimination to contemporary American society, which it happens in New Orleans, wherein such indirect act is the federal government's response to natural calamities. If you are aware of the um, federal government response to people who are Asian or foreigners or black. So it happens during the Katrina hurricane in New Orleans, wherein the federal government slow response during a high number of during a hurricane of a high number of blacks in New Orleans. So this considered as a prevalence of current racial discrimination in American society. This was recorded by Doherty 2015. So if you could imagine, um, the federal government did not respond well during the Katrina hurricane with the high numbers of casualties during the hurricane, and the government did not support them right away during the natural calamities. So the extensive reading, I have learned also throughout the materials that it enlightens me that racial discrimination in the employment sector in American world, I could say that it's not just America, but to all foreigners living in a new country. This really exists. That employment sector, they would prefer whites or they would prefer local compared to the foreign one. So racial discrimination in employment denies Asian fair pay in with regards to recruitment, promotions, opportunities, evaluation, and favorable working conditions and environment, which is true actually. While I was working in Saudi Arabia, the position, like, it's not about how good are you, but it's just how you manage to do the job. But as long as you're Asians, they would say, okay, consider do your job, and maybe in the future we will um, promote you or something. But the thing is, if you are really not racist or discriminated, you will be promoted according to your work ethics. And besides my learning journey, it has enabled me to connect with various diversities through racial discrimination in today's American society. May it be black, Asian, or whites, there are diversities theories that explain why racial discrimination exists and why and how racial discrimination exists. The social identity theories unveils that the occurrence of racial discrimination in America, where certain group members tend to favor of the racial discrimination and Asians to be out group members, according to Shepard and Elmer's 2019. So in conclusion, um, the the learning and the continuous reading of the related courses has satisfactorily or has educated me how racial discrimination against Asia has been deeply rooted in the American world. Despite all the effort of eradicating racial discrimination in the world, but still some are being affected with this case. And it affirms that, according to the studies or research, it affirms that people of color, may it be Asian or black, face racial discrimination in education, health, banking, environment in the American world. Not just in, no, oh, sorry. I would add that not just in American, but in a in a place wherein foreigners are like immigrating or migrating. So below are the sources that I used for my presentation, and I hope you learned something from it. Thank you and have a nice day.